Well, our moms think we're funny.
Hey everybody, this is Turk182.
And I'm Acomi.
And thank you for joining us again for our Watchmen character breakdown as we go into part 2 of Rorschach. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah.
So in between episodes, I was just kind of, we both got our Watchmen source material here that we're looking at. And in between episodes, I was looking at this and there's this panel here, this page where Rorschach goes to the newspaper vendor to buy a copy of the New Frontiersman, and he also gets a copy of the Gazette. And I think it's interesting. This is right after Dr. Manhattan goes to Mars.
Yeah.
And the vendor says, he says, sure. He goes, there you are. You know, I had it tagged for a red smear from the start. I'm a news vendor. How about you? I see the world didn't end yesterday because Kovacs is always walking around with a sign that says that, the end is near. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I see the world didn't end yesterday. And he goes, are you sure?
Yeah.
And it's like, and, to him, it's like, yeah, I understand the balance and what Dr. Manhattan represents, especially when we are 30 seconds to midnight. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden he's gone. It's like, it didn't necessarily end, but, that's it. It's like this is the end. Like now there's nothing stopping it from coming. Like this this is the very start of the end. And I like that. He's like, yeah. He's like, it didn't end. It's like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Just because the bombs don't drop today, but they're coming.
Well, that's the thing. Like there are people who would define the end of the world as when society stops progressing and starts going downhill. Mm-hmm. And so, and we've talked about this off mic many times that, there's a lot of people who theorize the world ended back in 2012 or something like that.
Right.
It's like, yeah, just because we didn't have this cataclysmic thing where cities started sinking into the ocean doesn't mean that society didn't stop developing and start getting worse and worse and worse. Right. And then, everybody's like, oh yeah, 2016 couldn't have gotten any worse. And now everybody's like, oh, 2020 couldn't have gotten any worse. And it's like, well...
It's like there's a point of no return that
just wait, people.
you can't stop it. It's a runaway train now. So an interesting thing, and I'm not sure if this is going to fall under Kovacs or if it's going to fall under Rorschach, but I think I'm going to put it under Rorschach, which is as we go through and we see that. And I think at this point here, we don't even need to say spoiler alert, but that at this point here, we know that this guy you've been seeing walking around this time, everywhere with this sign that says the end is near, and he just walks in the rain, showing no emotion, just walking around with this thing, and only everything he ever does just goes like, do you have the latest copy of the New Frontiersman? Yep. That's it. But you see him, before we know that that's Rorschach, you see him everywhere. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that if you go through and you look at the book, you see him at the funeral. So He's walking around, and someone that's walking around like that with their sign, you're going to see them in their normal territory. So if he's in the city like he normally is, right, you're going to see him walking around the city. You wouldn't see him on the outskirts of the city at the cemetery walking around with a sign.
Right.
That's you're going to walk your normal path or whatever, but you're not going to stray outside of that. Like, why would you? Mm-hmm. But we see this guy with a sign walking around the cemetery. And then we see when Dan and Lori go to dinner, mm-hmm. we see him there. I'm sorry, it's not the dinner. It's when they go, because they're in the rooftop restaurant, the dinner. It's when they go to lunch later on.
Yep. And
we see him there walking around, outside the restaurant there when they're having lunch. And then, of course, we find out later that that's Rorschach, and it's like he's been keeping tabs on them. He's been watching out for them. They don't know it, and he's not even making himself. He's not being like I'm like he's not. It's like a subconscious thing, but he's not making it known that I'm looking out for them. But he's there. He's always there, mm-hmm. just watching out for them, and in a sense, probably protecting them. He wouldn't do anything at that moment. But he knows he's been just keeping tabs on all of them because regardless of anything else, or I say them, I would say probably more Dan than everybody else, because Lori spends all of her time at the base and the research facility, so she never leaves. Osmandus stays in his glass tower; he never leaves. But his one friend, he's always watching out for him. And when Lori shows up, knowing that he knows Dan the way he does, right, and that Dan, has a thing for Lori, obviously he would, is like, here's this woman coming into his life. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I'm gonna look out for him. So here I am walking around, and then of course he's at the funeral paying his respects. Even though Rorschach pays his respects later, he's there at the time of the service paying his respects. But he's there looking out for him always. He's always there.
Yeah.
And his whole shtick of kind of making himself unnoticeable because he's got this, is like a crazy person. Like, you never wanted to ask them how they're doing because they might just tell you.
Yeah. Nobody pays attention to the dregs of society. There was actually an Usagi Yojimbo story like that where this proud samurai who served under the same lord that Usagi did, he disappeared for years. And so in one story, Usagi meets his son and they're just hanging out, and then they go their separate ways, and the son gets ambushed by bandits. And so they outnumber him, they're beating him, and then you just see this mangy, one-eyed hobo with a missing arm just jump out of the woods and just slaughters them all. And so Usagi, comes on the scene, he's like, what just happened here? He's like, oh, you don't recognize me? He's like, oh, it's you. Yeah, I didn't recognize you. He's like, yeah, he's like, that's the thing about samurais, they go out of their way not to notice beggars like me. And so if you go back through that issue, he's on every single page within a few feet of the sun. He's just in the crowd, and you never notice.
Just following him along, just watching out for him.
So he's been following his son for all those years. So it's that exact same thing where it's like, if you're not looking for him, you'll never notice him because people go out of their way not to notice that. So, yeah, same exact thing. It's super cool.
So, Rorschach Journal, this is, chapter 5, page 11. Rorschach Journal, he's woken at 11 by shouting outside, disturbed to find I had fallen asleep without removing the skin from my head. It was tireder than I thought, should be more careful. Across the street, boys with spray cans are defacing abandoned buildings, memorize the descriptions, then prepare for work. So again, I'm not doing anything during the day because this is Walter's time, this is Kovacs' time. First peeled off face and folded it, hid inside jacket. Without my face, nobody knows who I am. On the way out of room, met landlady. Usual complaints of hygiene and rent. There were purple bite marks on her fat white neck, fresh ones. She reminds me of my mother. And if you've got the kids there of different races, that it's like he knows her and he recognized her. He says reminds me of my mother. Obviously, it does. And there's, I think, in this regard, he's protecting the kids more than her.
Right.
It's like, I know that anything I say or do to her, she's probably going to take out on the kids.
Yeah, and that even gets touched on after he breaks out of prison.
Right.
Because he's coming up to her and he's like, I don't appreciate the shit you said about me on TV.
You told lies about me.
You told lies about me. And Dan says, no, dude, not in front of her kids. And he listens. He looks down at him and he's like, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to put them through what I went through.
So there's a lot to him that you don't really see because all you see is the brutality of him. And then that's it. And I love that. Again, you're talking about there's no emotion in Kovacs' face, but when they're there and she's so afraid when she sees him there. And I love this. Like, he bumps into her and he's like, Miss Sharp, long time no see. He's like,
it's like he tries so hard to...
It's chapter 10, page 6.
Gotcha. He tries so hard to just pepper in, regular niceties in his dialogue, and it makes it even more disturbing. It's like... Just like when he was like, yes, I'm doing fine, Happy Harry. How about yourself? It's like... It's way scarier than if you're just quiet.
Yeah. And he's sitting there, and Dan tells him, Night Owl tells him, he's like, Rorschach, come on, man, leave it. And which is interesting because he's not wearing his mask, but he calls him Rorschach, and he doesn't say anything. Because I think at this point it's like he's just like he's got his mask, he doesn't put it on, but he's got his mask, and he's like, there's like shit's coming to an end. It's like it's Rorschach and all this, but he goes, "Come on, let's leave." He goes, "Can't. Serious business, slur and reputation. How much did they pay you to lie about me, whore?" And she's like, "Oh, please, no, don't say that. Not in front of my kids. Please, they don't know." Mm-hmm. And he looks down at them, and there's no emotion on his face, but you can see the emotion on his face. You can see him looking down at himself, and then he just says, "Got what we came for. Finished here." And I think it's interesting that at that point she says they don't know, and he looks and he's like, they don't have to bear the uncomfortable knowledge of what I did when I saw my mom there. And it's like, so
it's just like
I'll let it go.
In the psychiatrist notes when it shows the drawing from his dream when he was 13. Yeah. It's like it broke him. It really wrecked his development.
And so, I've got more I want to say about that, but I'm going to wait till we get to that part. But there's so much about him that is, it's let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to cut to the end here, which is, we've talked about how Rorschach has a, no, I'm going to save it for the end of our Rorschach discussion, because I don't want to. I think it's more of a closer than anything else. So
I think so. I think there's a lot to the way it ends for Rorschach.
But we there's all this stuff in there that and we talked about he and Dan and how they interact, and like the nature of their friendship, and when he's like, "I'm sorry, Dan, you are a good friend to me." Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting as everything we've just talked about there, like Dan doesn't realize what a good friend he's been to him all this time. It's like, I can kick in your door and no one's going to rob you, because if they do, I'm going to come back for them later on. It's like, so all this time I've actually been looking out for you. You just haven't been aware, but I also don't feel the need to call that out. Right. Right. And the thing is, like, yes, I've been kind of a jerk to you, or, I've, lived off of you, but I don't need to tell you that, well, at the same time I've been protecting you, but it's like, you do your part, I do my part, and that's just how the friendship works. Yeah, yeah.
I love when Rorschach does this big transformation in, let's see, what chapter is it? Hold up. Chapter 5, page 18, you kind of get a sense of how he views himself as Rorschach. It's halfway down the page. Says, you getting there?
Yep.
This will feed into when we start talking about his interaction with the psychiatrist in prison. But halfway down the page, it says, my things were where I'd left them waiting for me. Putting them on, I abandoned my disguise and became myself, free from fear or weakness or lust. My coat, my shoes, my spotless gloves, my face. It's so good. And I love the line, my spotless gloves. Like, he doesn't want to soil himself with the world.
That is nice. And it's like even though his trench coat is dirty and nasty, and maybe you talk about how much he stinks, whatever, but his gloves are spotless.
Yep. Yep. It's like his mask is pure black and pure white, and his gloves are spotless. That's what's important to him. And then, of course, at the very bottom of that page, we get to see him just choke out a rapist, which is cool. Just the guy, the look on his face, like, oh shit, I'm dead now.
And this line here is a great line, and I think it could get lost in translation, which is where Rorschach says, there's the rapist there. And what's great is that he's in the process of putting his face on when he sees this guy. Mm-hmm. It's like he's just now starting, and the night, and there it is. And he goes, approach disturbance and attempted rape, mugging, both, clear throat. The man turned, and there was something rewarding in his eyes. Sometimes the night is generous to me.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's like, and some people are like, oh yeah, it's like, now I get to go brutalize somebody. It's like, no, it's like sometimes like the night is generous to me. Like, oh, here's another bad guy I get to remove, from from this equation. It's like,
yeah,
yes.
and here's one more person I get to protect.
Right. And it's like, it could be nice where I don't do anything except for like stop somebody from spray painting or so, whatever. Cause he says I take note of those guys' faces. So he's going to go back later. But sometimes, right. Sometimes the night is generous to me. Whereas like I find a real scumbag that I can just, take care of. And again, all a part of him, kind of just looking out for the city. Yeah. There's, what's that Batman quote? It's like, it's not the person we want, or was it the person we need? It's like,
not the hero that the city needs, but the hero the city deserves.
Right. Yeah. There you go. So anyway, so we go through all of this, and I guess now we should probably get into that, because I don't want to talk about the origins of Rorschach. Right. Because I think that even with the mask, without I think that's all a part of Kovacs becoming Rorschach.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of turn that opening part over to you there, sir.
So we get to him getting set up and arrested by the police, which we never really talked about any of his interactions with Moloch, but I love all the times he interacts with Moloch. The first time bursting out of the fridge, and then the second time he just leaves a note in the fridge that says behind you. So when Moloch turns around, he's just behind him. And he just takes the gun out of his hand. All that stuff is great, but so
I'm actually looking at that part right now as he pushed them in the fridge, and he takes an egg, a raw egg out of an egg carton, yep, and cracks it, and then just slurps it down like
a fucking animal. So he gets set up, framed. We've spoiled this entire thing every time. Everybody knows this is a spoiler-heavy review. So Veidt has set him up, killed Moloch, and framed him for it. The cops managed to chase him out of the building and catch him, and he gets brought into prison. That's when we finally see them take off his face. And
I hate to interrupt here, but the next page has something that I think kind of goes back to what we said. I guess maybe the last episode is, and this is just another part of the masterful storytelling of Alan Moore. Is there's this whole page, this 9-panel page with these cops, and that's it. That's just this page where they're at a murder scene, and she says he said the woman's talking. She's giving a statement to the police, and she says he said there was going to be a war with the Russians. Said he wanted to spare the little ones. Dominique, she kept saying what, which is like war. Then she's just 3. She repeats things, and then it's like this. Okay, Miss Hirsch, like no more questions. And the one cop says, "Jesus, what happened?" He goes, "Guy worried about nuclear war killed both kids in front of their mom, then opened his jugular." Like, and that's the things like what we just say is like it's like the world didn't end yesterday is like, are you sure? It's like, are you sure? And it's like, and here, what do we have? What we have like this happening now is like, we have this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, it didn't just wink out of existence, but right. Yeah, it's ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, but you were going,
so we finally, they catch him. They talk about how much he stinks because of his aftershave. I'm pretty sure he does not use nostalgia. They talk about how he wears elevator shoes to appear taller.
In the movie, that's when they capture him in the movie.
Yeah,
it's such a great scene. It's a beautiful scene. But I love about that is when he realizes that he's been set up. And the in the show here shows he's like no. The way that Jackie O'Haley plays that part in there,
it's perfect.
He's like he realizes that it's like, shit, I fucked up. It's like, yep. I'm so focused on this one thing, I wasn't paying attention. He's like, no, it's so well done.
That he was born to play the role of Rorschach, and every once in a while somebody is just born for their role. Robert Downey Jr. was born to be Tony Stark. He was born to be Rorschach. He is so perfect in that role.
He had a hard time, like he didn't like playing that role. I saw an interview with him. And he was
place to get into.
He said that it was like getting into that was not something that was very comfortable for him getting into that role.
Well, yeah, I mean, and since we're getting into that now, like you got to go to a really fucking dark place to play Rorschach. So I really like his interactions with the prison psychiatrist. So, chapter 6, we open up with him talking to the prison psychiatrist. He's showing him the Rorschach blot tests, and he like holds one up, and Rorschach flashes back to a dog with its skull split open. He says, "So what can you see?" And Rorschach goes, "A pretty butterfly." Yeah. Now, the psychiatrist, I think, is an interesting character because the more he interacts with Rorschach, the more you can see him breaking down in really subtle ways. And there's really obvious stuff, like his marriage falls apart and things like that, and he like destroys dinner with guests because they're like, "Oh, no, tell us all about this big case you're working." And then he's like, "Yeah, this guy kidnapped and murdered a little girl and fed her to his dogs, and Rorschach did what he did to him." Right. And just like, you can see all that stuff, but it's the little subtle things that really stood out to me in watching the psychiatrist kind of breaking down, because after Rorschach dumps the hot oil on the guy, he says, "The guards intervened," and this is the psychiatrist's journal, "The guards intervened, dragging Kovacs away to solitary and the other man to the prison hospital. According to the warden, his burns were horrific, hot cooking fat. I don't like to think about it. As they dragged him away, Rorschach spoke to the other inmates. He said, 'None of you understand. I'm not locked up in here with you. You were locked up in here with me,'" which I think that's one of the best lines in Watchmen. But then
fuck you, Addams Family.
Right. But then he says, "I just read back what I've written down above the sixth line, what I've written above. The sixth line down should read, 'Kovacs spoke to the other inmates.' Kovacs, not Rorschach." So even he's starting to realize, Rorschach's the real guy.
Right.
And it's like, it's not even a conscientious thing. It's like he's trying to force him into the role of Kovacs, and he can't.
You know, what I think is interesting about, you talking about the psychiatrist breaking down, and what I think is interesting about that is, here's a guy who, and we've said this before, he's a shitty psychiatrist.
Oh, he's terrible. Is. Yeah.
He's horrible. He's in way over his head with this. But here's a guy that believes that the world operates in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And because he sits down and he's like, "Well, Walter," and he's like, "You keep calling me that. I don't like that." He's like, well, and he's being like, "Oh, but what would you like to be called?"
Yeah.
And
he thinks that this is just your run-of-the-mill crazy person.
It's like, "I don't like that, and I don't like you." And and I think that's when it really
you're rich.
When it really scares him. It's like,
yeah.
But here's a guy that thinks that the world operates in a certain way, and why about these deep, dark crimes. Like when you're watching something on TV, like on like the Investigative Discovery Channel, whatever, like some horrific crime. And I told you that I used to watch some of those shows, and I do have my fascinations about different things. Mm-hmm. Like I fascination about. I don't say fascination because it's nothing that I find. I'm curious about how these things work.
Yeah.
But it's nothing that I'm fascinated with, that I'm entertained by it. I don't want to be entertained by it. So, I don't watch those shows anymore because I find myself being, because I'm watching to be entertained,
Right.
It's almost like a modern day, like Roman Colosseum. I'm watching it because I want to be entertained. I don't just watch it because like, oh, well, I'm just going to I don't really give a shit. I'm not invested in this thing at all. And I don't really care about my time. I can just as well go to sleep right now. So, it's like, no, I'm watching because I want to be entertained, and I'm watching this, and it's some story about someone that was horrifically murdered by somebody and this and that. And then later on, I find myself telling somebody about this show that I watch. I'm like, wait a minute, no. I'm being entertained by someone else's misfortune.
Right.
Right. And like, that's not good. But also I can distance myself from that, mm-hmm. Because and I'm watching on TV and it's, dramatized in this. And so there's this kind of like, this layer, this kind of like a gauze of it's not not real, but that it's not reality. Like those things happen, but they don't happen here. It's like that kind of thing.
And it'll never happen to me.
Right. And because it is, like we've got some parts of it that we've got this host that's that's telling the story, and then we've got a little bit of dramatization there and all this kind of stuff that it almost comes across as if it's like maybe a movie or a TV show, not real life. We know they are real life events.
Right, yeah. And so you can kind of divorce yourself from that reality.
Right. And this guy, I think, sees that, until here he is face to face with someone, and he's not telling them stories about stuff that he heard.
Right.
He's telling him stories about shit that he did. This is stuff that I saw, I took part in.
Like, here's what I did, and here's why I did it.
Right.
And if you'd been there, you'd be in the same fucking spot I'm in, buddy.
And now this guy's been forced to face reality about these kind of things really do exist. They do happen to people. And where before I don't know any of those people, now I'm directly connected to this because I'm face to face with a person. Mm-hmm. And there's no, I mean, because Rorschach never says anything like, I didn't do it. I'm not Rorschach. Yeah. I mean, any like crimes or like, that they say or anything they say he did, he's like, I mean, they don't actually show there, but he doesn't say I didn't do it. He doesn't try to please like, I'm Rorschach. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and that goes back to that earlier page where he's like, I abandoned my disguise and become my true self. Rorschach is the true self. But one page that's interesting, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but chapter 6, page 16. About 2/3 of the way down the page, the psychiatrist's writing style changes in his journal, and it kind of fits more with Rorschach's cadence. And like I said, maybe I'm just reading into that too much, and I want there to be something that there's not, but like when he opens it up, he's still writing normally. He's writing complete sentences. There's no like grunting or short sentences or whatever. He's talking about, he never says what it is that compels him. This is the second row of panels. It's not his childhood, his mother, or Kitty Genovese. Those things just made him overreact to the injustice in the world. They're not what sent him over the edge. They're not what turned him into Rorschach. It's as if continual contact with society's grim elements has shaped him into something grimmer, something even worse. If only I could convince him that life isn't like that. The world isn't like that. I'm positive it isn't. But then here, the next row, bought a Gazette on my way home, including a small piece about Kovacs, which the news vendor pointed out excitedly. Like, instead of saying, I stopped by and picked up a Gazette on the way home, it's just that short, choppy sentence, bought a Gazette on my way home. And that's more the way that Rorschach writes in his journal. And the way Rorschach talks. And I think I think that what's happening there is that Rorschach is getting to him even in his speech patterns. And like I said, I could be totally wrong about that.
I see that, because he says here, the coincidence is trivial but unsettling.
Yeah.
So is the front page. Russian tanks have entered Pakistan. On 7th Avenue, someone spray paints silhouette. It's like he's talking in that same way. Yeah. And then of course he can't sleep at night.
Yeah, and even the last panel was too exhausted to take in all the details and suggest an early night. So I think that that's what's happening, because right after he says the world isn't like that, I'm positive it isn't, and then he just starts slipping into the Rorschach worldview.
And I love the next page, panel 2. Well, panel 1 and 2. Where he goes, hello, Rorschach. How are you today? In prison? Yourself. I don't have to say anything else. Like, I'm in prison. Like,
so good.
It's so funny. Like, he didn't have to say, like, that's a stupid question to ask me. Right. It's just like, here you go. I'm going to give you an answer that's going to make you feel stupid. Oh.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, Rorschach, like, being, being in this world, like this guy, he was so unprepared for all of this, and then he just gets it just slapped in the face with it, and then he has to kind of face the fact that this is how how life is. Like, these things really happen, and he's so old that he can't really properly like digest it and break it down. And that's why at the dinner party, he just spits it back out. It's like, I can't really I'm too old to really fully take it all in and understand it. It's just sitting there weighing on me. And it's like things being layered. And so instead of it, you being able to kind of like eventually like mix in with everything else, just become a part of it, it just sits there on top. And then it's the first thing that comes back out.
Fat, wealthy, think you understand pain. I'll tell you something, doctor. I'll tell you about Rorschach. It's all so good. So, should we go into Rorschach's childhood, or should we go into the kidnapping?
I guess let's do the childhood.
I think the childhood, because he talks about the childhood before he talks about...
And I think that kind of really helps to kind of lead into things. And who he is. and I would say that out of everything that Rorschach has been through, it would be very easy for him to become this psychopath, become the opposite of who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout all of that, he still finds a way, or he still becomes a better person. It's like, I don't use my childhood and everything that happened to me to become this horrible, this beast, that is going to terrorize society. It's like, all the stuff that happened to me shouldn't have happened.
Right.
And I'm going to take this and say that, this never should have happened to me. So instead of making it happen to somebody else, making them suffer, I want to make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else.
Right. Right.
And that's how it's kind of interesting to that. But when he's meeting with psychiatrists, when he's telling him that, I'm going to show you like who show you all this stuff. He says, he asks the psychiatrist, because he's like, why are you doing this? He's like, well, I care about you. And he's like, really? He goes, because other people down the cell's behavior more extreme than mine. You don't spend any time with them, but then they're not famous. They won't get your name in the journals. You don't want to make me well, just want to know what makes me sick. He goes, you'll find out. Have patience, doctor. You'll find out. And it's interesting that Rorschach says this. Is like, okay, well, this is what you want to know, and I'm going to tell you, but it's like, do you really want to know these things? It's like, because once I tell you, then you're going to be in my world.
Yep.
And the whole reason I do this is so that you don't have to be in my world.
Yep.
So there are people out there that can really use your help. I'm not one of them. Yep. I see things perfectly clear. And he goes, but if this is what you want, then fine. I'm going to open your eyes to it.
Yeah, it's like I tried to warn you. I tried to keep you away from this. I do like the last line of page 10 where he says, I made a face that I could bear to look at in the mirror.
That's good.
God, that's good. Oh, Alan Moore, you fucking genius, you. But yeah, so the very first thing we see from Rorschach's childhood is when he's looking at the ink blot tests at the very beginning of the chapter. It's where he walks in on his mom having sex with some dude. He gives her $5 because it's more than she's worth.
Right. So, okay, going into that, going back to what we talked about before, when he runs into his landlord.
Yeah.
And she's like, please, they don't know.
The landlord looks a lot like his mom, too.
Yeah. And she's like, please, they don't know. And he's like, I think in a sense, he's almost feels, I don't want to say better for her, but like he gives maybe a little bit of respect for the landlord,
mm-hmm.
to where it's like, she's been careful not to let them know what she does,
mm-hmm.
as where his mom didn't. So it's like in that sense, he's like, she cares, she cares, and so he lets it go.
Yeah, doesn't it talk about when he hears that his mom died, his only response was to say good?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like we talk about. It's like I don't think he hates women. It's just that he hates certain types of people.
Right.
And I think he sees women as being more of like, you were supposed to be the people that protect.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't have a father, so the only thing he has is a mother.
Right.
And she didn't protect him, and he sees more of people like that, like the landlady, who there's no father, there's just children,
mm-hmm.
and their job should be to protect them. And when you don't, that's when I have a problem with you.
Right.
And even Lori's like, Lori protects in a different way,
mm-hmm.
but she protects.
Right.
Right. But so, here it is in that scene where like he comes in on his mother and his father, and his mother doesn't even bother to close the door.
Yeah.
Or to tell him like, hey, stay in your room tonight, or whatever else. And then the first thing that happens is she takes that on him. She's like, this is your fault. It's your fault that this guy only gave me $5. It's your fault that, that I'm like, and that's the thing is like, this is how my mother, the person that's supposed to protect me and keep me safe and explain things to me, this is how she treats me. She blames me for this, even though I had nothing to do with it at all.
Right.
And you have to assume, based upon all this, is that he was probably the child of a John.
Probably.
And
I mean, he would almost have to have been.
And yeah, and he even says, he's like, hey, I thought this guy was hurting you.
Yeah.
And again, she's like, takes it out of him. It's like,
beats the shit out of him.
Yeah, it was like, how dare you come and try to protect me, you little bastard.
I can't believe she tells me she should have had the abortion.
Yeah.
Any parent who says that to their kids, that's just awful.
And you can't really tell what she does to him, but she hurts him in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's yeah. So
it's hard to read.
I was gonna say, when we first started talking about about Watchmen, and the whole thing was like all these people who didn't have these like a role model or a figure,
Mm-hmm.
Someone to look up to, and with everyone else they found somebody. Even Ozymandias finds somebody. Rorschach never finds somebody.
Mm-hmm.
He makes his own person, and he makes a person that no one else can look up to, that you shouldn't look up to.
Right.
Because he doesn't know what that feels like.
Right.
He doesn't know what that should be. But he knows that he's doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't know, or it's the right thing as far as he sees it, but he doesn't know how to create a role model. And in his sense is like, that's, even if he even considers it, like to say, well, that's somebody else's job, it's just, I'm just doing what I have to do, but I don't expect anybody to look up to me. I don't expect anybody to really do what I do. I'm a solo act.
It's like he doesn't want that.
Right.
He doesn't want anybody to look up to him. He doesn't want anybody to think he's a hero. He just wants to do his job.
And like I say, he never finds anybody to look up to at all. He just does what he does.
Yeah. And that turning point is the flashback when he's going to the store.
Right. So, and what's interesting is that, like, the guards that are like, walking him through, you never really see any interaction between him and the guards either. Like, he just does what he's done. You would think that they would be afraid of him.
Yeah.
And they may be, but you never see, it's just even these short panels there, you never see that they're in any way that they're afraid of him. It's almost like this guy is way too civil,
mm-hmm.
For the guy we know. It's like
too withdrawn, yeah.
Right. It's almost like they're probably maybe even a little afraid because he is just so calm and it's orderly.
Yeah, like all throughout his time in prison, Rorschach is completely unflappable. And even like all of his interactions with the big figure, it's like that's the closest we see to any kind of personality out of him, because he's just like, big figure, small world.
Right.
Such a dick move.
He ain't giving you any of that big figure, small world crap anymore, is he?
Fat chance. So good. Such a badass.
So then we have the encounter on the street with the bullies.
Yeah.
And in these, they're just being just little bastard punks.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start attacking him. And the thing is when they start calling him a whore, the whore son.
Whore son, yeah.
And that's what really ticks him off, is like, it's, I know who she is. You know who she is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have anything to do with that. Like, that's not my fault. It's not like I had any choice in the matter.
Right. And was foisted on me.
Right. And I can't change any of that. But then they're attacking him as if it's like, oh, look at you. You're the son of a whore. It's like, oh, you like that whore son? It's like, I didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, I didn't ask for any of this, And the thing is, I'm the victim here in more ways than one. And, and then now you're attacking me. And even worse, like when you see him attack the kids, there are people standing around there watching him be accosted by these guys.
Yeah.
And they're not doing anything.
Right, yeah. Like, nobody says anything when they're doing all this shit to him, but then when he starts fighting them, they're like, oh, Jesus Christ, will you look at that? Oh, you little filthy animal. It's like,
right.
Any of you as adults could have intervened and stopped this from happening. This is what gives Rorschach his taste of justice. Because his solution to the problem, it's like, you guys are attacking me for something I have no responsibility over. He blinds him and he bites his face off.
Right.
I mean, like, okay, problem solved. It's that same nuclear reaction, that Chevy Chase nuclear reaction of, he was bullying me, now he will never bully me again. Problem solved permanently.
Right. And it's such a fine line here, but it says here, he partially blinded him. He was 10 years old. It's like, but these guys are bigger than him, so they got to be like 13 to 15 probably.
Yeah.
and you're bullying this kid. Why? Just to make yourself feel better because you think it's funny,
Right.
and then he attacks you, and like, but that's your fault.
Yeah,
You're the one
yeah.
that stopped him. You're the one that caused all of this. So did he go a little extreme? Probably. But at the same time, though, I mean, it's not like this is something that's regular for him. You know, it's like the thing with snakes. You know,
Right.
like baby snakes are deadlier than adult snakes
Mhm.
because they can't regulate their venom.
Right.
So when they bite, they release all their venom, and you know, and snakes only have like a stored amount of venom.
Right.
And
right.
then, you know, once they release it all, then they have to wait for that to build back up.
Right. Yeah.
So a baby snake, if it bites you, I mean, it's deadlier because they just give it all out.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the same thing. Here's basically a baby snake, and you provoke him, and he attacks, and he just goes all out. As opposed to another person maybe just, okay, I'm gonna like knock you down, you know, punch you a couple times. Like, no, he goes all out. But again, you asked for this.
Yeah.
He
It's like
wasn't,
it would have cost you nothing to just walk by.
Right. And the thing, so not only do they stop him and they start making fun of him, then the guy takes like the tomato or whatever it is and smashes it in his face for absolutely no reason because you're the son of a whore. Again, that had nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
You know, that is, you know, so yeah, you kind of got what was coming to you. You're lucky that you got off that light.
Right. Yeah.
And then, so I think this kind of ties into the next thing, which these people sat there and watched him, like, you know, you know, verbally assault him and then, you know, smash the thing into his face and they don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he fights back, then it's a big deal. But while it's going on, right, they're entertained. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
he's just like, oh, well, yeah, that's what you get for being like a whore son or whatever it is. Like,
Right,
that's
yeah.
what you get. And they just sit there and they watch and they don't do anything.
Right, yeah. Like anybody could have prevented that, which that shapes Rorschach's whole worldview. That's the whole reason why he brings up the Kitty Genovese thing. It's like,
Right.
shit goes bad and people just watch. And I'm not content to do that. I'm going to intervene.
And in a way that is like, just like him. It's like,
Mhm.
you know, she wasn't in a position to fight back or couldn't fight back or maybe couldn't overpower him like I did when I was a kid, but I've been there.
Yeah.
It's like, and this stuff is still happening where people are being attacked and other people are just standing there watching it and not intervening at all. They're not stopping it. And it's going to go wrong in one way or the other. Either they were going to keep beating on him until they like hurt him. And the people were going to watch. And then it's like after someone's been hurt, then people want to step in there. Well, you're watching it go down.
Right,
Step in
yeah.
there now.
Yeah.
And so it's either I'm going to fight back and hurt them or they're going to hurt me. But either way, you guys are watching and you're not doing anything. And in the case of Kitty Genovese, it's like you guys watched until it went all the way to this point here.
Yep.
And then you didn't do anything.
Yeah, what really hits me with him talking about the Kitty Genovese thing, he says, almost 40 neighbors heard screams, nobody did anything, nobody called cops, some of them even watched. Do you understand? Some of them even watched. I knew what people were then, behind all the evasions, all the self-deception, ashamed for humanity, I went home.
And you know, the whole Kitty Genovese thing is based off of a true story.
Mhm.
I heard something about NPR maybe a couple years back, and the account had always been that it happened and people watched. It actually started in one place and then ended because the person like followed them and finished the attack.
Yeah.
Like I think like a block away from their home or on their doorstep or whatever. But the whole time, like they were crying for help and people didn't do anything and they heard it and they didn't do anything. They didn't try to get help at all. But, you know, the leading up to the Kitty Genovese thing and what made that even worse was, again, here's someone where he's directly involved in that.
Yeah.
So it starts off 1956, age 16. So again, he's still just trying to live his life the best he can. Left the children's home because he was put in a children's home. Did you want to talk about that at all? The case, the psychiatric case files and all that kind of stuff, the reports?
I mean, it doesn't really flow in with the direct story, but if you want to, we definitely can. I'm not as familiar with those because I kind of skipped over those last read through.
Well, they basically just kind of like outline, you know, that he went to a kid's home and, you know, and they were like, you know, this kid's, you know, psychopath or, you know, whatever. It's like he's got trauma, you know, his mother is this and that kind of stuff. But he left the kid's home at 16, became an unskilled manual worker in the garment industry. He goes, Job bearable but unpleasant. Had to handle female clothing. So that's something he's uncomfortable with because of his mother. I think it's safe to say, and I think we said before, that Rorschach is a virgin.
Yeah, yeah.
And he has no interest in being involved with a woman sexually because the only thing he's seen of it is what he sees with his mom and then what he sees with prostitutes on the street. And he doesn't know a different side. He doesn't know like a side of like, a loving relationship or anything else. This is all he sees. And right, it's dirty, it's filthy. And the only thing he ever sees are just women selling themselves and guys buying them, or being brutalized. In 1962, so he's been doing this for 6 years now. Special order for dress in new Dr. Manhattan spin-off fabric, viscous fluids between 2 layers, latex, heat, and pressure sensitive. Customer, young girl, Italian name, never collected order, said dress looked ugly. Wrong, not ugly at all. Black and white, moving, changing shape, not mixing, no gray. Very, very beautiful. I'm sorry, that dress moving like that, and so I'm like, that just seems like it'd be kind of awesome, man.
Yeah, that'd be tight.
But he says nobody wanted it. Meant for me. Took it home. Learned to cut it using heated implements to reseal the latex. When I cut it enough, it didn't look like a woman anymore. So that's kind of, I guess, maybe telling in a way. You say that you think he kind of hates women.
I think he's scared of women. I don't think he hates them.
Okay, scared of women, and I think in a way he does dislike women when they come across in a certain way.
Yeah. Like
in this woman here, like here's this dress that was made special order, and she's like, I'm not going to pay for that. That's ugly. And then he's like, you're an ugly person.
Right.
And then he takes and he cuts the dress up and to where it doesn't look like a woman's dress anymore. And so then he realized the woman who ordered the dress is killed, and it's like there's that connection there between the woman, the dress, the murder, and it all just kind of comes to this thing. It was like something people need to be protected, and even in this where he's like, I didn't like the woman, I didn't think she was a good person, but I didn't want any harm to come to her, right?
Right.
So it's not like I feel justified that this happened to her because she was a mean, ugly person or whatever. It's like, no, these are completely unrelated things. She didn't deserve to happen to her. But again, it's like, this is the first time that this kind of thing has come home.
Yeah.
Just like it is for the doctor, where it's like,
because that was somebody that he at least peripherally knew of.
Right.
Like he'd seen her, he knew her name. That always makes a difference when you hear about somebody dying. It's a very, very real difference when it's somebody that you know who they are. And it's like, oh, damn. I've been in the same room as that person.
I wonder if he somehow maybe felt responsible because he cuts up the dress and he says, when I'm done, no longer looks like a woman. Mm-hmm. And then soon afterwards, someone attacks and tortures her in this. And maybe he says like, maybe I was somewhat responsible because I cut this dress up to,
right.
And now
because I didn't want it to look like a woman anymore.
Right. And now, this thing happened to her. So like, obviously like it's not, I didn't actually physically have anything to do with it. Not like it was my bad thoughts, put that out there, right. But it's like sometimes like, ooh, that's really coincidental.
Yeah. Yeah, and from there, the psychiatrist talks about, you've been conditioned with a negative worldview. There are good people too, and he's just like you.
And I like how the psychiatrist then on the next page says, Kovacs hated his mother. After her death, he needed somewhere to put his anger, and so he chose a criminal fraternity. As he justifies it, but you see he's got this kind of blank stare in his eye. Mm-hmm. He goes, the flimsy story about Kitty Genovese is obviously to justify his behavior to himself. It's perfectly simple, case solved. It's like, but even there, he's trying to tell himself that, but you can tell he doesn't believe it because obviously Kovacs has been away from his mom since 16. He's like 22 now. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't become a crime fighter yet.
Yeah.
So if that's what he wanted to do, he would have started doing that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And even after, like, it's not until the kitty thing that it happens, and he's like, "Oh, this flimsy story, it's just a way to justify the baby." But no, he could have been doing that already if that's what he wanted to do. If it was all tied to his mother, he could have been doing that a long time ago.
Right.
So it's and I think that it slowly starts to like eat into them that this view of the world and everything within it, and just how wrong he's been. And how he's like he's never really. It's almost in his way he's never really seen the world, and he's seeing it all now for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if you noticed that when he's talking to him, he's got a bottle of I guess maybe a Mylanta or something like that on the table, and he's unscrewing after he talks to Rorschach to lead him away, and he's gonna take some to settle his stomach.
Right.
But then when he's in his office that night, he's got 2 bottles sitting there on his desk, and it's like, and then when he's meeting with Rorschach, again, or Kovacs, he's got 3 bottles. One's empty, and the other 2 are sitting there that are still capped and full.
Yep.
So it's like it's getting to him. It's getting him, and not just when he's with Rorschach. It's when he's not there. It's like it's he can't shake it.
Yeah.
It's like, once you've seen, you can't unsee.
Yeah. It just eats at him.
Did you hear what happened?
All right there, folks. That was Our Moms Think We're Funny. Let's give them a hand.